All right. Well, aloha kako. Fix that. It's good to be back. I'm Father Charles Browning, the rector here at St. Mary's Episcopal Church in the always beautiful city of Honolulu, Hawaii. If you are just now tuning in for the first time on any one of these things, that's who I am. If you've been around for a while, then you know that I have been away, and I'm happily back. And that is a big part of what we're going to be discussing this evening, is a bit of a report from abroad, bringing news from the continental United States out here to us in our archipelago. So we'll get right to it. But first, I just want to say it's good to be home. And I want to give just a quick note of thanks to folks here who did a lot to offer help to Cana and the children, and especially to Father Frank, who held the fort down while I was away, and all of that, which I know I've said these things on Sunday, but just in case anyone missed them, I just want to make sure that they're out there. And I thank you most especially for your prayers. And in the event that any of you who are watching this were folks that saw me while I was in Massachusetts or in Florida, and are now checking out things that I'm doing, I thank you also for welcoming me into your midst and your communities. I was, of course, the preacher at my friend Jeremy's installation as rector at Grace Church in New Bedford, Massachusetts, or New Bedford. I can't really do that accent. Sorry, guys. And which was a great occasion and a great event, and I was very excited to be there for that. And I also served as a supply priest for 2 services at St. David's in the Pines in Wellington, Florida, in my former diocese. And so that was also an exciting thing to be a part of. And so if any folks from those communities are watching this, aloha again, and como mai, welcome. And yeah, so we'll just get right into it. If this is your first time tuning into any of the stuff that we do, we offer a little service of evening prayer to start things out. If you don't have a prayer book, I just dropped the link in the chat box. And if you do have a prayer book, we're on page 139. If you're going to use the link, you will need to scroll down to where it says in the early evening, because that's what we're doing. We are doing the prayers for individuals and families appointed for the early evening, which is one of the great resources in our Book of Common Prayer. But yes, this is the Episcopal Church's 1979 Book of Common Prayer. So if you have one of these, page 139. If not, then join us on the link over there. And so just so we can get right to it, let's take a moment of stillness to breathe. To be centered, to let the cares and concerns of our day peel away from us like onion skin, and to move deeper into our na'au, into the center of our being, in that place where we can feel the presence of the Lord. This is a time where if we have any burdens, we just lay them aside, lay them at the feet of our Lord Jesus, and just bask in his presence, to abide, as he says in John's Gospel. Now, let us say together, O gracious light, pure brightness of the ever-living Father in heaven, O Jesus Christ, holy and blessed, Now as we come to the setting of the sun and our eyes behold the vesper light, we sing your praises, O God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. You are worthy at all times to be praised by happy voices, O Son of God, O Giver of life, and to be glorified through all the worlds. Our reading for this evening actually comes from, it's a portion of one of our readings for Sunday. And given that we are talking about a Hawaiian concept tonight, I'm going to read this verse in both English and Olelo Hawai'i. And as I always warn people, I am still working on my Olelo Hawai'i, my Hawaiian language. And so be patient with me if you speak it better than me. And give me points for trying. So, 1 John chapter 3, verse 16. No ia mea ua ike kako ike aloha. No ka mea ua waiho I hola o ia I kona ola no kako. A he mea pono no ho'i ia kako. Ke waiho a e iko kako ola no ka po'e hoa hanao. We know love by this, that he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. Here ends the reading. This verse, I'll put my Bible away. This verse is one of the great 316 verses in the Bible. And why I think it's a good one for us in this conversation of aloha is not only because in the Hawaiian version of the verse, we get a very clear use of the word aloha, but it works as a definition for it, and also works as a definition for love in the English language. And we'll talk more about that in case you need that clarity. But what I always think of with this verse, and I go back to it, is that the scriptures give us a love that is not undefined. I know I'm using a double negative there, but it is a love. We don't have an undefined love as Christians. I'll talk more about this in a bit, but growing up the way that I did, very interested in like the 60s and 70s counterculture. I've mentioned this in many sermons. I've been struck by, right, like, Burt Bacharach's, what the world needs now is love, sweet love, right? The Beatles, all you need is love. But when I was in high school, at a very, very Baptist high school, it was like my 9th or 10th grade history book had an article about the Beatles. U.S. history book had an article about the Beatles and love, and talked about how the Beatles sang about a love undefined. And there was a lot of stuff in the fundamentalist history book that I'm willing to throw out, but that has stuck with me. Because, yeah, like what do you mean when we say love, right? All you need is love. Well, what do you mean by that? What do we mean by love in that sense? And so for Christians, we're not left with that lack of definition, right? We get it clearly. This is love. This is how we know love. This is how we recognize love. Love is defined by the fact that Jesus laid down his life for us. And even that laid down his life is in Greek, the word there conveys this notion of like being put forth, offered, set out. So it's not just like the conventional substitutionary atonement type thing, for those who know what I'm talking about when I use those seminary phrases. It's the sense that his life is set for us, right? Like he gave it to us. He is sharing his life with us. It's not just I laid it down, right, to die, but it is, right, like, I mean, yes, but the death was part of this, what the theologian Graham Ward calls this dispossession of God, right, through Jesus. That right. So it is something that becomes us, right? Like becomes part of our life too. We receive that life, and we participate in that life. And so it's not just this kind of like one-way exchange kind of understanding. And so this is love. Love is this, and using the Hawaiian concept, the Hawaiian language, this is aloha. Aloha is this offering. We know it because we know it by the fact that this offering has taken place. And we also make a similar offering. We're supposed to do that because that's aloha. And so we'll flesh this out a little bit more as we get into it. But what I love I love this verse in the sense of, right, just the conversation around love in the Christian faith. But I also really appreciate this verse given the notion that, right, aloha is this, Hawaiian, the Kanaka O'iwi, Kanaka Maoli concept that Christianity was introduced to, and I think is something that resonates with what Christianity has largely outside of the Greek language probably struggled with conveying, especially in English. And so this becomes a gift that we can learn from our contact with the Kanaka Maoli, Kanaka O'iwi perspective, and see it, how it resonates with what Jesus has been teaching us, and make it better for us as Christians, give us better tools, a better understanding, and not just leave us with generalities like that we so often find ourselves with. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So with that now, I invite us into, and yet again, another time of stillness for reflection, and to think about this notion of love, aloha, whichever word you're more familiar with, and how it is defined by this offering, this giving, this sharing of the life of Jesus and the life that we ourselves are supposed to share, our own lives shared just like he shared his, so that there is ongoing sharing. And this is also a time in that same mindset to offer our own thanksgivings and our prayers to God, either silently or aloud. And I now invite us to say the prayer that our Lord Jesus taught us. I will be using the contemporary translation of that prayer, and I invite you to use whichever version you're most comfortable and familiar with. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Save us from the time of trial and deliver us from evil. The kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours now and forever. Amen. Lord Jesus, stay with us, for evening is at hand and the day is past. Be our companion in the way. Kindle our hearts and awaken hope, that we may know you as you are revealed in Scripture and the breaking of bread. Grant this for the sake of your love. Amen. Okay, so, all right, let me grab a quick sip of tea here. And talk a little bit about what we're doing tonight. I mean, I've already talked what we're going to do tonight, but, give us a little more rationale, a little more background what this is. So as I mentioned earlier, I was over on the continental United States for about 10 days, invited to be the preacher for my friend's installation as a rector in New England. So I got to see a good chunk of New England. I don't know if I got to see a good chunk of New England. I don't know. I saw New England, and then spent several days down in Florida visiting my mother and friends, and in both cases was invited to offer my sacerdotal duties as a priest to churches in these communities, which was a great blessing in both cases. And I had a lot of thought, a lot of things to think about while I was there, and a lot of things I wanted to talk about and share with you all once I got back. This was the first time since I moved to Hawaii to have left. I've been out here for 4 years without interruption, and I don't feel I needed an interruption. Yeah, I know some people talk about rock fever and all that stuff they get from being on an island all the time, but I have not yet experienced any of that. And so it was. It took this invitation and all of that to get me to go. So I went, and this was the first time that I got to come home to Hawaii. The first time I arrived here, well, not the first time because I came for interviews, but when we moved here, we were moving to our new home, but it didn't yet feel like home. It hadn't yet fully become home. But now it has. And so it was an important milestone for me to come home to Hawaii. I needed that experience. And that feeling and that experience was underscored by what I also experienced while there in the continent. Much of it was, there was much that was not positive. There was much that was positive, and I want to be very clear about that, it wasn't, just like a miserable time over there. But I was surfing with this lady the other day, and we got to talking, and she said that it's almost like a different world over there. And I had to concur. And I think any of us who live here in Hawaii, and who've traveled over there, we understand what that means, right? It does feel like a different world, a very different place. I was aware of that from moving there to here, but this was now my chance to see it with a fresh set of eyes, a fresh perspective. And as I've teased in the descriptors of this installment of our online stuff, there was something lacking, something needed, something definitely missing in that experience. And so what I thought would, as I've sat with this and I've tried to ruminate on it, I realized it's probably good for me to share some of that for a variety of reasons, one of which is to help those of us here who live here to feel, reassured about, that it's, we're very blessed and lucky to live Hawai'i, for those of us who are so blessed and so lucky to live Hawai'i. So there's much of a reaffirmation piece to this. But there's also, I think, some learning for us, and maybe even a kuleana, a responsibility for us to share some things of what we experience here for the benefit of others. Because, like the bumper sticker says, we're lucky to live Hawai'i. Well, why is that? And why is it that, what's missing in other places? And just to give you the summary of it, the spoiler alert piece about it, it's aloha. That's what's missing. Aloha is missing. And so I think aloha is something that we, especially as Christians from Hawaii, have a kuleana to share. But we have to be clear about what we mean when we use that phrase and what we're talking about. Now, I want to be clear about a couple of things before we get into it. The first is I want to be careful first how I talk about aloha, because I have to acknowledge that I am dealing with, when we are dealing with a concept that is ancient and belongs to a people. I shouldn't say a different people, but a people that don't look like me. And that there is a fraught history of people who look like me taking words and concepts from other peoples and utilizing them in ways that are often conducive to the agendas of, again, people who look like me. I am trying to talk about this in a way that is humble. At this point, I feel like I have, this is a concept that I have, sort of denied, and I feel like, is part of my understanding of things now. But again, I have a different relationship with this than someone who's, generationally been a part of this aina, this land. And so I just have to be, careful with that. And so I hope that, people will understand that I am trying to be careful, and that if I misspeak, be gracious, and I'm willing to receive correction. But yeah, just to keep that in mind. The other thing I don't want to do, and I want to be careful about, is not sound like I'm like, continent bashing or mainland bashing or something like that. I don't want to come across as though anything I'm doing is like writing off literal millions of people just because of where they happen to live. That's not helpful, right? There is a stereotype, especially having come from Florida, of treating places that aren't Florida as like bad, because like, why would you want to live where it's cold? Why would you want to live where it's landlocked, right? There is the phrase within the continental United States of referring to basically anything between the coasts as flyover states, especially the Midwest, which is ironic because they're arguably the most important states in the continental U.S. because it's where the food comes from. But we treat them as castaway and flyover, and that's kind of actually how we've gotten into the political problems that we're seeing in the continental United States today. But I digress. So I don't want to come across as that, because that's not what this is about. This is not about we're better than everyone else. Why can't more people, we're better than everybody else, that sort of thing. That's not what this is, right? And this is, because one, it's not good to assume that sort of like everyone should live here, because we don't want everyone living here. But we also want to acknowledge, right? But I think it's more important for us to talk about what is so special about here and what we get here living in Hawaii that we can then share with others, so that where they live can be better and they don't feel the need to like have to come here to get it, if that makes any sense. So yeah. So, all right. So aloha. And let me just say that I talked about aloha in my sermon in Massachusetts. So if any of you heard that, I may repeat myself a little bit. But I shared in that sermon because the readings came from Jesus's conversation with his disciples right before he's arrested. And he is talking about abiding in his love. And in the Hawaiian Bible, it is the word aloha, to abide in his aloha, and to let his aloha abide in us. And that just as he abides in the Father's aloha, so we can abide in him, and all of that sort of thing. And so I noted that this was a really great verse to talk about aloha and the importance of what aloha can be, because aloha, right, isn't something that can be commodified. It's not something that can be bought and sold. It's not something that can, there's a tourist sense of aloha, and then there's like the actual sense of aloha, and I'll just share where I get this comes from this book. My light just reflecting off of it. Detour is a decolonial guide to Hawaii. This was a book I got before I moved here. And there's a great chapter in here on aloha as deoccupied love. And so it was that chapter, which I've read many, many times, that has, excuse me, that has given me the illustrations and definition that I use. So the core image that is used in this book, and it purports to come from ancient melees and ancient wisdom and knowledge, that sort of thing, is that the image of aloha is enshrined in the ohia lahua and the o'o bird. Again, you've probably heard this before from me, so pardon the repetition. But the ohia lahua, the ohia flower, that is the flower that is on the thumbnail image, little red puffball flower. That plant is why everything is here. It is of central importance in Hawaii, in the culture, in the myth, and all of that, because it's the first thing that can sprout after freshly cooled lava, because it has these tiny little seeds that can be carried in the upper atmosphere that can then fall with rain into the little holes, little pukas in dried lava, and can absorb that water and can actually take root and begin the work of transforming lava into soil. And of course, once trees grow, migratory birds, which poop out the seeds of other fruits and other trees, rest on those branches and then help spread other trees. And so that's basically how we get everything that we have here in Hawaii, because of the ohia lahua. But then there's the o'o bird, the honey creeper, birds that love the nectar, right? And there's other animals who love the nectar, the ohia, but the honey creeper, the o'o, is seen as an important bird for this, because it flies among the flowers, collecting the nectar and moving on and spreading the seeds locally of the ohia. And so the relationship between these two creatures, right? These two people, the ohia and the o'o bird, constitutes the core understanding of aloha, or illustrates the core understanding of aloha, that the aloha that the o'o bird has for the nectar results in the ohia having love for the bird. And so that aloha that they each have then spreads and creates the space for aloha for more things. And so aloha then becomes this interconnected web of activity. And it is something that is constituted, right? It's not captured. It's not, it's constituted between us and among us, and between us and among us in terms of creation, not just us as people, but with the world in which we live. And so because of this, and this is something that, it makes up the fabric of Hawaii identity, right? And at this point, it's something that is understood and lived by people that aren't Kanaka Maoli, right? What we might call Native Hawaiian. Anyone who lives in Hawaii, especially people who've lived in Hawaii for generations, people who call Hawaii home, have in some ways internalized this sense of aloha. And it becomes something that we experience daily, and therefore makes things notably different in the way that we interact. So when I was over on the continent, one of the first thing that I was immediately struck by was how impatient everyone seemed to be. I had the experience of driving a few times, and I saw, right, speed limits are way higher over there than they are here. So that was already something that took some getting used to. But to watch people blow past, a 75 mile per hour speed limit, people are blowing past going 100 easy, weaving in and out of cars, all of this is impatient. And I couldn't help but wonder why. I mean, when that happens here, because it does happen here, we do see people drive like that here. But I think generally it's so, depending on where you live, I guess maybe it's more common. Where I drive, I don't see it that much. And so when I do see it, I sort of assume someone's in like a legit hurry. They need to be somewhere, like there's an emergency, right? Something to that effect. But over there, it's so common And those of you who traveled there and driven there know what I'm talking about, right? It's so common that it just becomes the way you do things. And when you drive, you feel the pressure to do it too. And so I wound up having to drive to Miami from Boynton Beach while I was there. And it took a 20-something mile drive. It took an hour and a half. So no one in Hawaii, other than recent misfortunes here, can really complain about traffic. Because Miami traffic is in a whole different ballpark than Honolulu traffic. But I saw people, I mean, again, aggressive driving, this pressure, I felt it, on me to have to be like this, people riding my butt to make me go faster and all of this. And I couldn't help but wonder, like, what are we so impatient for? Where are we trying to get to? And I realized, thinking back to growing up there and what it was like for me, and I used to drive like that. And I realized it's not so much anyone's trying to get there. It's that people are quickly trying to not be where they are. And so that fosters this sense of dissatisfaction. And I have to acknowledge, I'm making assumptions here, so I could be wrong. But there seems to be this fostered sense of dissatisfaction and even this sense of unhappiness. We're chasing something, right? People are chasing something that's not, they can't find it where they are. And so they're in a hurry to try to get somewhere else, maybe in the hope that they'll find it. And that seemed to be the general energy that I felt while I was there. I hope, if my mom's watching, I hope she'll forgive me for using her as an illustration. But we were driving back. We were driving back to her place, and we were just going to go back to her place and just relax. We had no real plans. We were going to get dinner a little bit later, but we were basically just going to sit on the couch and watch TV, something that my mom and I have not done in a really long time. So just the two of us. And so we were on the road, and there was some construction traffic. And I noticed that my mom in the passenger seat kept like doing this and like, and I'm like, is everything okay? And she's like, oh, I hate this traffic. I just want to get through this traffic. And I'm thinking, well, what are we going to do? We're going to go home and sit on the couch and be with each other. We're basically going to go do at your house what we're doing right now. So what's the hurry? What's the hurry? Why do we need to? Why do we have to be angry? Right? Like it's construction traffic. It is what it is. We'll just deal with it. And it was just like, that idea was just sort of like, it just never popped into her head. And I remember being, again, growing up in that environment, feeling the same way. Like, no, it's wrong. Like, I've got to get around this. I've got to avoid this. I've got to best these other people. I've got to whatever. But then like I come here and I come back home, right? Speed limits are lower. And even in traffic, generally speaking, people are pretty amenable to one another. You need to get over, people let you over. And if, there's a mistake made, you cut somebody off, you give them this, right? This is another thing continental people need to learn. This is a beautiful thing, the shaka, because it covers a whole range of sins. You actually cut somebody off and give them this, you might get a begrudging one back, but, right, you can at least acknowledge, hey, I messed up, right? There's some grace implied in this symbol sometimes. But, right, so the general demeanor, the energy on the road is just different. It's just different. The other one that struck me was I was at the Ala Moana Center a couple days after getting back, and it was crowded, as is to be expected. And I was circling in my level of the parking garage, trying to find a parking space, and I saw one. But then I saw this other car also caught it. And I sort of felt like I probably saw it first, and I was getting ready to go for it. But then I saw the car was there, but I noticed that the car was being driven by an auntie. And so we both kind of like had to stand still. We were both looking at each other, and there was some hand gesturing going on. Like, are you going? Am I going? Like, who's doing what? So I just rolled my window down, and her window was down. And I said, hey, auntie, I said, are you going to get that parking space? And she said, yeah. And I said, okay. And then she goes, oh, but I saw another one back there. I was like, okay. And so I went, and we both got to park, and it was just lovely. It wasn't like the experiences I had where it was like, oh, I got to get in this parking space now. Screw you. I got to do that. I saw it first. It's mine. I mean, in Florida, people will actually sometimes shoot each other over parking spaces, right? Because that's another piece of life, right, that you have to worry about over there, especially in Florida. And so it was just such a nice refresher to thought, okay, this is different. Why is this different? Why is it that Auntie and I feel like we can have this conversation and nobody has to feel angry? No one has to feel a sense of animosity. We can just acknowledge, right, that there's a parking space, and then I'll acknowledge there's another one that there's given enough time, there's enough to go around. Even today, some of you know Wednesday is Shave Ice Day. The kids, because my daughter who's here at preschool, when we pick them up, we often go get shave ice. And so we show up at Wyola Shave Ice, shout out, and they're getting ready to film like a commercial or something. And so it was like, oh man, like, okay, so there's a whole film crew there. It's clear something's going on. And this uncle comes out, and I don't think he's one of the Wyola guys. I think he's one of the film guys. And he just comes out and he's like, hey, you guys need to come hurry, get your kids the shave ice before we got to film. He's like, we're getting ready to close. But they like delayed their shooting time so that my kids could get shave ice. Like that's not something that everyone gets to experience. And so again, it begs the question, why? Why do we get it like that here? Why are we not in a hurry here? Why do we feel more empowered to share things with each other? And again, I think it's because aloha makes a powerful foundation, a powerful fabric for who we are and what we do here. And so I think then it's important for us to help share that, because over there, they need it. They need it. They need what we have here. Now, that's a tough thing, because again, aloha is something that we have turned into a tourist term, right? We've turned it into this thing that sort of just means like, hey, relax, lay back, hang loose, that sort of thing. But that's not aloha, because again, aloha is constituted, and it only exists when we share, and it really exists when we authentically share, right? The ohia can only be an ohia. The o'o bird can only be an o'o bird, right? And so when they are both fully themselves, aloha manifests, and they are participating in the great web and stream of aloha. And that's the same for us. And so that means we need the mechanisms to be able to properly talk about this, but also the ability to resist the co-opting of this concept. And love in English is no different, right? And let me just say, I like talking about aloha, and I like using aloha, and I wish this was something that we could sort of weave into wider Christianity, because I feel like the concept of aloha is closer to what Christians are trying to get at in the Greek-speaking Christians are trying to get at in the New Testament than the English term love. Because again, love is generalized. We talked about this earlier, right? Love is this word that we use to refer to our intimate partner, all the way to like our favorite sauce that we like to put on our food, right? We use it ironically, we use it flippantly, glibly, while also intimately. And so it's this word that, in some ways it's great that it has so much currency in our culture, but I feel like we're at a point where it doesn't mean fully what it can mean. That love is not a great word for what we're talking about. Now, some of you may know that in the Greek language, there are 4 words that the English language translates as love. And so the Greek Bible, right, the New Testament, has a much more nuanced sense of what it's talking about. You may know some of these are philia, which is the what we call brotherly love, right? The love among peers, or familial love, as I guess it were, but it's more of like a friend love, there's not a romance or sexual love piece to it, right? That word, that notion is picked up by eros, right? Where we get the word erotic, right? That's the passionate love. That's the love of, right? Of every movie. And then there is agape, and I can't remember, somebody, caritas, like that's Latin, anyway, whatever. And then there's agape, which is actually an obscure Greek word that Christians took on to talk about the love of God because it didn't have the baggage of the other words. And so agape is this, right? It becomes sort of a blank slate word, and this is the word that Paul uses and is used to translate what Jesus is talking about in the Gospels. And so agape becomes this word that, right, like it kind of means what it means as it's used in the New Testament. We don't really have as much peer review of this term, and so when we get to English, we use the word love because that's the English word that sort of conveys what we think is the similar concept. But when we look at the way in which, like, agape is and this concept, you know, that we define as love in English is used in the New Testament, we find that it's, you know, it is particular, and it's broad, yes, but not broad in the way that love in English is broad. And I think, you know, it's closer. It's a closer concept to what Aloha is all about because it's something that we participate in. Again, right? We, you know, to abide in God's love, in God's Aloha, right? It's something that we live into, that we, right? That it's not just something we pick up and put down. It's not something that we hold on to, right? You know, and again, using the verse that we use in our study tonight, in our prayer service tonight, is, you know, it's we know it by the fact that Christ shared his life with us, right? He put his life out, he laid it out for us to, you know, to, and then we do the same, right? And so again, the way the o'o bird and the ohia, or the o'o bird and the ohia tree, right? Their lives are offered, their lives are put out, and therefore Aloha happens or is entered into, so it is for us, right? So again, I think this is a really close concept, right? That, yeah, you know, that of what Paul and others are trying to capture, but was something that was really well articulated by the Hawaiian people. And so it's one of the great gifts that even Christianity can see this term and say, here it is, right? We, you know, this can be part of this explains what Jesus is doing. This is a great gift given to us through our contact, you know, through the propagation of the gospel. And so with this comes the opportunity for us is we're going to share the good news of Jesus Christ. And that means we share the Aloha of Jesus Christ, which means we share Aloha. And so this becomes good news because it means there's a richer way of being, a richer way of living. We don't have to think of things in like commodified terms, in terms of scarcity, whatever, right? Because once we realize that we're offering and sharing in things, and therefore we're participating in a life together, that really challenges the dynamic, the status quo dynamic that we see in much of the world today. And so I think, again, this is a powerful concept, and is something that we here in Hawaii can offer a way to articulate a way of living, right? It's not something that's like foreign to other parts of the world. It's just now perhaps we have language and imagery that helps because it can be seen in other ways, right? So in Florida, one of the predominant ecosystems in Florida is scrub pine, which is also a type of wet desert. And it's called that because though a ton of rainfall falls on it, it doesn't hold the water. And so it's a very cool ecosystem. And it largely considered by developers and others to be just sort of like boring nothing land. But it is actually a very cool and intricate ecosystem when you get out into it. But it's an ecosystem that is dependent on lightning, because Florida is like the second highest lightning strike place on Earth. There's like some part of Africa, and Florida is it, right? And so scrub pine depends on lightning. Lightning strikes, and the lightning will strike a pine tree, which will cause the pine cones to open so that the seeds can spread. It burns away overgrowth to help things restore and find balance. And so with that, you can see aloha, right? You can see aloha. The pine tree grows tall and thin so that the lightning can strike it, right? That is an aloha relationship. And they both need each other. And so we can look at where we live and we can see these connections and say, oh, here's a way in which this concept is reflected or incarnated where we are, not just, right, something that exists over there in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, right? So in this case, we're not taking the term, but we are seeing the term in how it is embodied in the cosmos and how it is embodied in creation, and therefore allowing it to inform how we live and exist, right? And we see this as Christians, right? We say we love Jesus, and so we go to church. Well, when we go to church, what are we doing there, right? Are we just there to consume religious products? No, right? We find made very apparent for us in the sharing of the Eucharist, right? This very explicit statement of what is talked about in 1 John 3:16, Christ's life, right? His flesh and his blood. Life is where, you know, life is found in blood in the scriptures. And so his flesh, his life is offered to us. It is put out. It is laid down on the table for us so that we can receive it. But in that receiving, right, we are also understanding that we share what we get from that with each other, and we are sharing that among each other, right? Paul talks about how we are constituted as the body of Christ through this, right? Christ isn't broken up in us. We are united in him. And so this is an aloha relationship because it is a relationship rooted in sharing and offering and in receiving, right? You know, tourist aloha, much like the generalized love, is a thing that, you know, is often treated very one way, right? It's something I'm here to get, right? I'm looking for love, and so I want to get that love, right? And so I'm looking for someone who's going to offer me love. Maybe I'll offer it to someone too, but like the goal is to get it. The goal is to get love, to feel love, to be loved, to feel aloha, right? I travel to Hawaii because I've heard about this aloha spirit, and therefore I want to feel it, right? And so I get something, I go, I take photos, I take experiences, I take, and then I go back, right? And I share what I've taken. But what am I offering back while I'm here? And what am I offering back when I'm back home? How is aloha something I'm actually living into and participating, right? It's kind of like why a number of hotels have started partnering with kalo lo'is. If you don't know what I mean by that, it's the taro patch, right? Growing taro, which is a staple crop here in Hawaii. They're offering opportunities for folks to work in the kalo lo'is to help, you know, cultivate, grow, harvest kalo as part of their vacation. And offering some discounts as an incentive to go and do this so that you give something back while you're here, not just take things while you're here. But that doesn't just have to be something we do here in Hawaii, right? That's something that can happen when you're, you know, when you're back at home on the continent, right? We can start living this kind of life now, right? Living the kind of life that we want to see, right? So maybe it starts with not being impatient when we're stuck in traffic. Maybe it starts with slowing down when we drive, letting the other guy in front and not getting upset, and maybe even giving them the shaka, even if they don't know what it means, right? It's something. You know, it involves, you know, this sense of giving, right? Not just this obligatory, like, oh, I have to give to the poor, I have to give to things so that, you know, I can be on God's good side or whatever, as we often find ourselves trapped in, but doing it because that's aloha. It is, we're participating in it. We've experienced it and we have to offer it. And the thing that we are called to offer is our authentic selves that we only know because we receive them through our reception of Jesus offering his authentic self for us. So I know this has probably been a little bit weird. That's good. Weird is good. Christianity is supposed to be weird. Um, and and I hope it's been helpful and informative. I hope it gives us a good sense of what this concept that we live with here in Hawaii is all about, but also what we might offer, when we travel elsewhere, or how we might be able to talk about it and articulate it in a way, and and realize that it's, again, what I think is what Jesus is wanting us to talk about. I think this is the good news. It's defined through what Jesus is doing, right? Because it is sharing, it is an offering, and we are participating in it, not just consuming it, not just, taking it, right? It is both and, right? And so this becomes good news for the world. And so again, I hope that we hear that and that we feel energized and empowered to do that in our own ways. And if we don't know how to do it, that we're prayerful and discerning and hoping and asking God to show us, or asking the church community to help us to perceive, right, who we are and what we can offer as our great gift to the world. I'll close just talking a little bit about Duke Kahanamoku. Duke is a famous Hawaiian figure, one of the first of two Hawaiians to win gold medals at the Olympics, him for swimming. But Duke is an important figure in surfing culture because he brought surfing with him as he traveled around the world, in movies and different things, right? But one of the things that Duke was known as, in addition to being this figure who traveled the world to bring the gift of surfing in Hawaiian culture, he was also known as the ambassador of Aloha. And I've been thinking about this a lot because of all the things that Duke could have done, all the stuff that people probably wanted for him to do, right, was to be the exotic Hawaii. I mean, he's this tall, muscular, good-looking man. And so there's probably this expectation that he would bring, right, this exotic otherness, right? That's what white America was wanting from him, right? They were expecting, this tribal person or what have you, when he talked about Hawaii and Hawaiian culture. But he gave people the gift of, playing in the ocean, which wasn't necessarily a common thing in those days. And he gave the gift of surfing, but in the midst of all of that, he also gave the gift of aloha, to talk about aloha and what aloha was about, so that when people interacted with him, they felt it. And that for a while, at least, surfing culture captured the spirit of aloha. Now it's gotten influenced by jock culture and unfortunately has lost a lot of that, but there's still elements of it there. And so with him went this gift too. So the world has already gotten a taste of it from one ambassador of aloha. Maybe we Christians can learn from Duke, we, especially us Hawaii Christians, to the ambassador of God's aloha, the aloha that is defined for us by what Jesus is offering, what Jesus has shared. So that we can participate in this life of God, participate in this life of aloha, not at odds with the world around us, not at odds with each other, not impatient, not unhappy, not any of that, but allowing this glowing light of the good news that we Christians know to shine from us. Because here's the other piece. I've said a bit about, what was not positive and what I experienced and what I think was lacking when I was over there. But I was at two churches, and there was this spirit of people in these churches, right? It was, you felt, you could feel the sense of what I know to be aloha in the people of God in these church communities. Our presiding bishop often says, if it's not about love, it's not about God. I think then the truth has to cut the other way, which is if it's not about God, then it's not about love, right? These things have to inform each other. And so I think those who know Jesus know this thing, like we call it aloha here. I think Paul called it agape. This thing that Jesus was trying his level best to get us to understand and to get us to grasp through his offering on the cross and his resurrection. It's something that's alive and well in the church communities that I got to be a part of. And so I just hope that we can be better about that we can give that out. I see Carlton, the law of Aloha in Hawaii. Yeah, this is all right. This is another cool thing. Yeah, I see you're going to pop the definition up there. So again, woven into the fabric of where we live, woven into the fabric of what we do here. But it doesn't have to be stuck here. This is something that we can give out everywhere we go. So yeah. I will say, while it's popping up, Carlton, and I've got just like 5 minutes, so let me share one thing I thought was kind of cool. So John 15, this was the passage that was read at my friend's installation, and this is the whole, just as my Father has loved me, I've also loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love. All of that, right? So you can and you can substitute the word aloha for love in every one of these passages, because that's the word that's used in the Hawaiian. But prior to this, in John 14, is one of these great verses that Jesus gives. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give to you. Do not let your heart be troubled, nor let it be fearful. All right, so peace I leave with you, my own peace I give to you. So in Aloha Hawai'i, that verse is translated, He aloha ka'u e waiho aku ai ia oko. O ku'u aloha ka'u e ha'avi aku ai ia oko. So in this case, the word peace is translated as aloha. Or whatever the word in Greek was, because the Hawaiian Bible was actually translated from the original languages, not from English. Anyway, so what the English translates as peace, the Hawaiian translates as aloha. So aloha, right, is also more, is captured in this notion of peace. But this peace, my peace, right, God, Jesus's peace, the peace that passes all understanding. And so again, it's a broader thing than just this general sense of love, right? It goes deeper, and like as Carlton shared with this, right? The law of aloha, right? Kindness, unity, agreeableness, humility, patience, right? These are things, right? If you read, oh gosh, right? Oh, here's a good experiment for you. This just popped in my head. Thank you, Carlton. Carlton is listening to the Lord, and therefore the Lord is speaking through Carlton, and I too am listening to the Lord through what Carlton has inspired. So 1 Corinthians 13, right? I'm sure we all know this. I hope we know this, but right, this is the great love chapter, right? If I speak with the tongues of men and angels, but do not have love, I become a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal, so on, so on, so on. Right? Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not jealous. Love does not brag, is not arrogant, does not act becomingly, so on and so on. It's aloha, right? This is aloha in the Hawaiian Bible, right? Right? Okay, aloha umana vanui uloko maikai ole, and so on and so forth, right? So love is kind, right? There's kindness, right? In the law of aloha. Love is patient. There's ahanui, patience, humility, agreeableness, right? These are all things that that Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 13, right? So again, the connection, agape, right? Aloha, right? This concept. So a fun experiment for you to maybe try is to read 1 Corinthians 13, but substitute the word aloha for love, and just see what comes out and see how that might impact you and affect the way you think about this concept and this notion, right? Because again, it's not a tourist thing, right? This is a deep thing for who we are here And it's something where our Christian faith and this concept resonate in a very powerful way. And I think it ties in with the gospel, the good news that is much needed throughout most of our world. Because, again, as Burt Bacharach said, what the world needs now is love, sweet love, right? But it's not undefined, right? The world needs aloha. We know it. We experience it. We find it defined through what Jesus, defined, informed, enriched by what Jesus has done. And so this can be part of the good news that we proclaim. So thank you all. I will let us go. It's been a while since I've done a full hour. So this was a one part. Next week, I'm still discerning what we're going to talk about in terms of series. If you have anything that you would like to hear discussed on this, please let me know. I'm always happy to take requests. So thank you all. Thank you, Carlton, for that. That is super helpful. And what a beautiful gift for you to remember that and to share that in here. So I pray God's blessing on you all in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Hope you all have a good night. Have a good rest of the week. Join us Sunday, either online or in person. Love to have you be a part of our Ohana here at St. Mary's, one way or the other. And take good care. And if you if you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. All right. Ahui ho. E malama pono, take good care, and I will see you when I see you. God bless.